At over 11,500 feet in the Himalayas, India once depended on a single mountain pass. A few hours of snow could erase it from the map. For months, an entire region vanished from the network. That vulnerability didn't just slow movement, it defined logistics, authority, and what the state could not afford to lose. So the country chose a different solution, and it starts here with the mountain. Ladakh. The high desert people picture as silent, brutal, and impossibly far. In the valley towns, you see fuel drums stacked early, long before the cold arrives. Truck engines idle at lower elevations, waiting for a single clear window that might hold or collapse in an hour. Up here, winter isn't a season, it's a closure you can feel coming. Where the road once climbed exposed switchbacks for hours, a straight line now runs under the pass. An 8.7-mile road tunnel replaces a surface route that can disappear for 5 to 6 months each year. A crossing that took roughly 3 hours becomes closer to 20 minutes. Not because the mountain got easier, but because it got bypassed. The point was never speed for its own sake. It was certainty, removing seasonal disappearance from the corridor entirely, so movement no longer had to be timed like a gamble. Operating at elevations near 11,500 feet introduced constraints that shaped every decision before excavation even began. Oxygen levels dropped significantly at that altitude, limiting human endurance and sustained work capacity. Winter temperatures routinely fall below zero, while wind and snowfall can isolate sites for extended periods. These conditions made intermittent construction impossible. The project had to function continuously or not at all. Before excavation could proceed, a year-round work presence had to be sustained at altitude. Seasonal withdrawal was no longer acceptable. Activity had to be normalized in an environment where absence had previously been unavoidable. That choice is expensive to reverse, not because of ideology, but because the entire rhythm of supply, staffing, and procurement relocks around permanence. Each month of continuous operation reinforced expectation among planners, contractors, and local operators that completion was no longer optional. Crews rotated through thin air, supplies climbed in weather gaps, camps stayed lit when the pass above was already white. In that sense, construction conditions did more than shape engineering choices. They locked institutional momentum into place. The mountain stopped being an obstacle to be tested and became a condition the state had already accepted as unavoidable. Once resources, personnel, and planning cycles were anchored at altitude, retreat became increasingly costly. Not technically, but institutionally. Budgets locked, supply chains adapted, timelines hardened. The project moved beyond experimentation. It entered obligation. Once that presence was established, the constraint moved underground. The Zoji Law alignment cuts through a young and still active mountain system shaped by tectonic collision. Stress remains locked within the rock itself, releasing unpredictably as space is created. Conditions shift rapidly between intact formations and fractured zones influenced by water and pressure. Progress underground followed a logic of control rather than speed. Each advance committed the project further into the mountain, increasing sunk cost and reducing the feasibility of reversal. Every completed section made abandonment less plausible, binding the future of the corridor to the structure being carved beneath the range. At this point, the tunnel ceased to be a proposal. It became a trajectory. Once the project entered the mountain, it could no longer retreat from it. In the Himalayas, exposed rock degrades quickly under pressure, vibration, and water. Delay itself becomes a hazard rather than a neutral pause. Stabilization followed excavation almost immediately, converting temporary disruption into permanent structure. Water introduced a different form of risk. Meltwater and groundwater seep through microfractures, accumulating invisibly until damage occurs. Managing it was not a maintenance detail, but a prerequisite for permanence. The tunnel was not being built to exist briefly, it was being built to endure decades. Once the mountain was contained, the project shifted from creating space to defining a system. At elevations above 11,500 feet in the Himalayas, mobility was defined less by distance than by fragility. Communities, supply chains, and state operations relied almost entirely on Zoji Law, a narrow mountain pass embedded deep into India's national transport system. This corridor was not simply a road, it was a structural dependency, the only surface link connecting the Kashmir Valley to the Ladakh Plateau across this section of the range. That dependency shaped behavior long before any crisis occurred. Transport schedules, fuel storage, food reserves, and administrative rotations were all planned around the assumption that access would periodically disappear. Reliability was never expected, it was managed. The mountain dictated not only movement, but institutional rhythm. Governance adapted to absence rather than continuity, normalizing disruption as a permanent condition of statecraft in the region. This condition reshaped how authority itself was exercised. Officials rotated in and out based on seasonal access rather than administrative need. Emergency response plans assumed delayed arrival. Infrastructure maintenance followed opportunity instead of schedule. Over time, governance in the region became reactive by design, built around interruption rather than continuity. Even civilian behavior adapted. Households planned winter reserves months in advance. Institutions duplicated critical supplies locally, increasing cost and inefficiency. What appeared as resilience was often compensation for systemic fragility, a workaround for a network that could not guarantee presence when it mattered most. When winter snowfall arrived, Zojila could disappear within hours, not partially, completely. Access was severed not for days but for entire seasons. Civilian life, military logistics, and administrative continuity were disrupted simultaneously, forcing the state to plan around absence instead of availability. Movement stopped being an assumption. It became a gamble tied to weather windows and tolerance for risk. The result was prolonged isolation for the region beyond the mountains. Routine transport halted. Supply replenishment shifted from predictable flow to emergency stockpiling. Medical access thinned. Fuel deliveries became intermittent. And when the road is closed for months, every delay has weight, because there is no alternate surface line to absorb it. Movement was no longer a constant, it was conditional. Instead of continuing to treat that isolation as an unavoidable feature of geography, India chose to alter the structure of connection itself. This was not a seasonal mitigation effort, nor an operational workaround designed to cope with disruption. Rather than adapting behavior to the mountain's surface limits, the strategy shifted toward bypassing those limits altogether. The decision to go through the Himalayas transformed access from something negotiated with weather into something enforced by infrastructure. It marked a shift in national posture, from reacting to terrain to reorganizing around it. Geography stopped being a variable to endure and became a constraint to neutralize. That choice changed the problem from weather to geology. The Himalayas impose extreme relief, forcing surface routes to cling to exposed slopes and follow terrain rather than override it. Roads inherit the instability of the landscape itself, embedding risk into everyday movement and long-term planning. Landslides, avalanches, and freeze-thaw cycles are not anomalies here, they are constants. Surface reinforcement never eliminated that instability. It delayed failure without removing it. Each intervention added cost while preserving vulnerability. The mountain retained veto power over access, deciding when movement was allowed and when it was not. And veto wasn't theoretical. It looked like convoys stopped in place, drivers sleeping in cabs, and supplies pushed forward in short bursts when the slope allowed it. A corridor that closes predictably every year becomes a planning liability in any national system that depends on speed, coordination, and deterrence. Response timelines stretch, supply chains harden defensively, decision-makers compensate with redundancy instead of efficiency. Over time, this forces the state to choose between tolerating vulnerability or eliminating it structurally. In a corridor with no substitute route, delay isn't just inconvenience. It becomes the default operating condition. Geography begins to influence strategy not through terrain alone, but through timing. Zojila Pass, located at roughly 11,575 feet above sea level, linked two regions shaped by entirely different constraints. The Kashmir Valley supports dense populations, agriculture, and continuous civilian activity. Ladakh operates under high-altitude scarcity, thin air, and limited seasonal access. Yet for decades, a single mountain pass served as the sole channel for transporting goods, fuel, personnel, and military resources between them. Each winter, snow closed the route for 5 to 6 months. The closure did more than interrupt traffic. It suspended integration, governance slowed, supply chains fragmented, strategic mobility collapsed into static positioning. The region beyond the pass became operationally constrained at the exact moment when logistical resilience and rapid mobility were most critical for territorial continuity and national coordination. In geopolitical terms, this mattered. A frontier region that cannot be reliably reached weakens deterrence, slows response, and forces planning around delay. Integration delayed becomes integration denied. To remove that constraint, India initiated construction of the Zojila Tunnel, a road tunnel running beneath the pass for approximately 8.7 miles. Its purpose was simple, but its implications were systemic. Uninterrupted connectivity throughout the year, regardless of snow, landslides, or sub-zero temperatures. Access was converted from a seasonal privilege into a permanent baseline condition. The tunnel compressed a 3-hour surface journey into roughly 20 minutes. More importantly, it removed seasonal uncertainty from national planning. Movement across the range no longer depended on climate tolerance, but on infrastructure availability. Reliability became constant. Planning followed. That scale of intent required confronting the mountain directly. With structural integrity secured, the tunnel transitioned from construction logic to infrastructure logic. The focus moved toward durability, continuity, and governance. Control systems embedded oversight into the tunnel's operation, allowing it to function as an integrated corridor rather than a passive void. Conditions inside the tunnel could be monitored, regulated, and responded to centrally. That changes behavior outside the tunnel. Once a corridor can be observed, controlled, and corrected in real time, it stops being treated as a risk and starts being treated as a baseline. Emergency planning shifts accordingly. Redundancies are removed, schedules tighten. This is where dependency becomes structural. The more systems assume uninterrupted access, the less plausible reversal becomes. Not because it is technically impossible, but because too many decisions now rely on its continued existence. As reliance formed, dependency followed. Routing decisions, emergency planning, and regional supply assumptions began to treat uninterrupted access as a given. Once that assumption settled in, reversal stopped being theoretical. Removing the tunnel would not restore the mountain. It would dismantle the system built around uninterrupted access. The completion of the Zojila Tunnel converted seasonal access into permanent integration. Weather ceased to dictate when connection was possible. Planning assumptions shifted from contingency to continuity. This redefined the purpose of the project. It was never solely about crossing a mountain. It was about eliminating uncertainty from a corridor that could not afford it. Warehousing logic, delivery cadence, and routine mobility all begin to compress once closure season disappears. Over time, permanence compounds. Investment favors predictability. Administrative reach extends naturally where access is guaranteed. Regions once treated as seasonal exceptions begin to integrate into long-term national planning cycles. This shift is subtle but decisive. The tunnel does not announce transformation. It enforces it quietly by removing uncertainty from thousands of individual decisions that no longer need to account for absence. What changes is not just movement, but expectation. And expectation keeps tightening because once winter no longer shuts the road, buffers shrink, and the cost of any interruption rises. Today, the tunnel runs under snow that still buries the ridgeline above it each winter. Traffic continues anyway. Rotations keep rotating. Deliveries keep arriving. And as each season passes without closure, fewer plans are built with months of isolation in mind, which makes the corridor feel even more permanent. The mountain is still there. The weather is still there. But the system now behaves as if disappearance is no longer allowed, and that behavior keeps compounding.